y'all don't meet him. Y'all professionals.
Let me hold you tight, if only for one night. Let me keep you near to ease away your fear. And it would be so nice if only for tonight. You know that I won't tell a soul, 'cause no one has to know.
You don't need no music.
If you want to be totally discreet, yeah, I'll stay at your side, if only for one night.
Yeah, so Sheldon, one of the things people keep talking about is, where does Luther stand in today, as a soul singer, R&B singer? Because I really got, it was the mid '80s that I really got to know him, and the one thing, especially if you watch or listen to him sing live, he just seems to not rush. He seems to be able to take his time, not overdo it. But he just seems to have this a voice that is hard to replicate. Soft, tender, and emotional as well. And if he is in any poll, most people always look to him and think, R&B. He was probably one of the, in some of our minds, one of the best out there. What are with your research and studies, where do you think Luther ranks when we're looking at, say, all-time top male R&B singers?
My favorite singer is all time is Teddy Pendergrass. Okay. But I understand why Luther is considered the all-time great. One is because Luther Vandross had an extremely long career. So people of a certain age, they might have heard the music, and as they got older, he was always around. So if he wasn't on the radio, he was doing music videos, and he just had his first breakthrough album was in 1981, and the last album that he made was Dance with My Father, which came out in 2005. Right? So think about that. So that's over 20 plus years. So that means that during the time he came out up until 2005, his final album, he transcended multiple generations. So it gave people an opportunity to witness his talent, his gifts, and recognize how great he was. Unlike someone like a Teddy Pendergrass, is that he's like the bridge to what the 80s artists who were coming after him. He was the bridge to that, because he was the first R&B artist to have like 4 to 5 platinum albums in a row. At the time when albums were male R&B singers were going gold. Every album he was putting out was platinum. Wow. But he came out during the time when Black music was kind of peripheral music, where it wasn't like a lot of huge crossover. Music videos really hadn't arrived. So by the time he was kind of at his peak, he got into a bad car accident that paralyzed him. And ironically, and this is in 1982, that same year, everybody's coming out behind him. The momentum is there. Teddy Pendergrass used to be in the group, and he left a group, went solo, extremely successful. And by next thing you know, in 82, a lot of male R&B singers are leaving groups. A lot of record companies are looking for their own Teddy Pendergrass, so to speak. Wow. So it kind of opened the door for male R&B vocalists, which is kind of the same situation when Whitney Houston came out. When Whitney Houston came out, she kind of opened the door. She kind of created a demand for young female R&B vocalists, the Regina Bells and the Mickey Howards, and Anita Baker is part of that as well. So it's just I understand why people say Luther is the all-time great, and he is great because he's kind of in his own lane, so to speak, because Luther Vandross was born in 1951. So he's a teenager in the 1960s. So he's modeling himself after female singers. That's his major influence. So he's studying the Dionne Warwicks and people like that, where he's studying their technique, how they sing. He's not raised in the church. So he's studying female singers in terms of their delivery. He's also comes up in the era of a unique style of songwriting that focuses on poetry. It focuses on romance. And his music is a reflection of that, because he does a lot of remakes that come from that era that he grew up in. So if you listen to him sing a song like this, "A House Is Not a Home," which is a song that Dionne Warwick made in the 60s, and you're listening to him sing, it's very dramatic. There's a lot of restraint. It builds up to a certain pitch. It builds up to a certain space, and then it's very dramatic. It just comes down. It's just it's like it's very cinematic. His songs are very cinematic. But basically, what he did was he migrated. He really transported the music from his youth, and he incorporated it into the music that he was doing. And he was a student of artists who came before him, but he was also a student of singing. So it wasn't about, can I sing the loudest? It was about the delivery, but he had a vision for himself in terms of what kind of artist that he wanted to be. Now, a lot of people don't realize is that before records, Luther Vandross made a great living singing radio jingles, singing commercials that were on television. So he was wealthy before he even started making music. But because of how he looked, he was dark skinned, he was heavy set. So when he went to labels to try to put out his own album, this is the time when Teddy Pendergrass, who was a very, very virile, sex appeal type guy, a lot of record industries rejected Luther Vandross. So what Luther Vandross did, he took his own money, went into the studio, and he financed his own record. And you also got to understand too, is that Luther Vandross came up in the era of the background singer. And the background nowadays, background singers, people don't really value them, or the emphasis is not on them as much. But in the 70s and 60s, 70s, and 80s, you could make a great living as a background singer, because it was about, when people had budgets in the studio, they spent money on musicians, background singers. So he made a great living. So he could sing background on a rock record. He could sing background on a disco record. He could sing background on an R&B record. He could go on tour as a background singer. So he made a great living. But he could sing. He could sing on key, perfect pitch, perfect tone. And that was the era where you had to know how to sing. Not so much in terms of being able to sing up front and dominate, but you had to be able to sing within the context of the song, hold your note, keep your note. You're not taking over the person who's singing, who's hired you. You're not trying to oversing them. So he is a technician in terms of singing. So when his time came, he took all of those gifts and all of those talents, and he imported into the music, imported it into his catalog. So when people hear him, I can understand why they say he is the all-time great, because he's made a lot of great songs. You got to understand, there's a 10-year period where Luther Vandross was going platinum, double platinum,
Wow.
triple platinum. There's nobody doing that. He's the only one, but at the time he's doing it, his record company is making no effort to cross him over. So Luther Vandross is like pop's music's greatest submission, but R&B's greatest, best kept secret. So he was great, but also Luther Vandross had a vision for himself. Is, yeah, I do R&B music, but I am in the same category as a Frank Sinatra, as a Nat King Cole, because he understood you're not going to pigeonhole me as an R&B artist. So he is a singer. He's a song stylist. He's a perfectionist. He's the extreme professional. When he goes out on tour, he's very particular in terms of how his stage setting is set up, the emphasis on his background singers. He showcases his background singers. When he sings in venues, there's no air conditioning. He is the consummate professional.
Wow.
He's a consummate professional. He had, from album one, he had complete control. So he, whatever he wanted to sing, he wrote songs. He collaborated with his bassist Marcus Miller. They made great songs. He had a great arranger, Nat Adderley. If you listen to Luther Vandross albums, there was a consistency. He worked with the same background singers, the same producer, the same arranger. So when you look at him, he's R&B's, I think, most prominent brand. He's like an exquisite brand. He's the equivalent. He's R&B's equivalent to Gucci, Louis Vuitton. That's how I say it.
Okay.
Because that's how exquisite he is. Now, mind you, there were great artists that came before him, but he arrived right when music was kind of like coming out of the era in the 70s where it was really about soul music. His music was it was soulful, but it was extremely polished. And then he was able to thrive in the video era. There's a period of time when Luther Vandross is the first Black artist to have 2 platinum albums in 1 year.
Wow.
But in the era of Michael Jackson and Prince, you know, he didn't have that profile that they did. A lot of times his record company, he blamed them because his record company for a time didn't like the music that he was doing.
Wow.
You know, but he had control in his contracts. He was a great businessman, so he had control. So he didn't enjoy the same platform as the Whitney Houstons, as the Patti LaBelles. He wasn't on MTV, you know. But the thing is, he was dedicated to the craft of music, and of course, he's no longer here, and it shows. So that's why when you look at him, and people, they say, okay, he's the all-time great because he is the first R&B singer, pure R&B singer that people have of a certain era, certain age group, they have a memory of because he's radio, he's videos, his albums are there. Everybody else you heard, but you also saw him. He dominated radio. And his last album, he won Album of the Year. You know, but people realize behind the scenes, he always fought to expand the platform of what a Black singer could be. He was a businessman, you know, before the Puffies, before the Jermaine Dupri's, he was a businessman to where he charted his own course. He controlled his sessions, everything. Touring, he made he was a big, huge touring draw. So during the period of time in the 80s when R&B kind of revolved around its own orbit, he was a superstar among superstars. He didn't play an instrument. He didn't dance. But for certain fan base who loved traditional R&B, love music, he wasn't overly sexual. If you listen to his lyrics, they loved him. And the people coming after him, hearing the music, studying singing, they grew to love him. I remember watching Showtime in the Apollo in the 80s and the 90s, and you would see artists, young people, trying to sing his songs, trying to imitate him when they would go on stage. So Luther Vandross is R&B's most exquisite treasure. There are so many great artists, but he's R&B's. He's the equivalent of R&B's. He's equivalent of Louis Vuitton and Gucci. He's in a lane, in a space by himself. But at the same time, he reflects the continuum of Black music. And he if he was alive, he would tell you that, because he's inspired by the female singers. Well, a lot of people are male R&B singers. They're inspired by male R&B singers. So he was a champion of female singers. That was his lane.
Yeah, and I think I've seen a documentary of him, which I mean, and I think that's the one thing about Luther, is that he maybe because the rumor was that Patti LaBelle fired him, and because she thought he was just too good to be at the back. And
you mean Roberta Flack? That was Roberta Flack.
I was Roberta. I thought it was Patti LaBelle. Okay, Roberta Flack.
But that was Roberta Flack, because at the time Luther Vandross he was making a lot of money doing background singing. He was singing radio jingles and whatnot. And around like 1979, 1980, he was going on tour as a background singer for Roberta Flack. And Roberta Flack, if anybody doesn't know, she was a great singer who had major success in the 70s and the early 70s, all the way into the mid 80s. Killing Me Softly. She made great records with Donny Hathaway. So it got to the point where she told Luther, "You getting too comfortable to be in the background. You need to go out there, and you need to go out there and go get it." But again, he had tried here and there, and he didn't have the look. He wasn't like a sex symbol. He didn't have that polished look. He didn't look like People Bryson in the white suits. He wasn't like really overtly had the masculine look like Teddy Pendergrass. He was almost, when I look at him, he's the equivalent of what when you look at, he put it like this, he's the anti, if I have to use a female, I won't say a female singer because I don't want people to take the wrong context, but he's the equivalent. If there was a male equivalent of a Beyonce, he would be the anti-Beyonce. That's what he was in the 70s, going into the early 80s. He was the anti-Beyonce, male anti-Beyonce. I won't say any. I was going to say some names, but I won't do it. But that's how you frame it.
Okay. Okay, guys. Oh goodness. Yeah, artists and songs and singers are all subjective. And so it's almost impossible to pick your favorite. Well, you can pick your favorite, but to say who was the best is impossible. And so for many, Luther is at the highest level, but for others, the other artists that come in there, Teddy Pendergrass, as you mentioned, or Prince, Michael, and whatnot. But let us know your thoughts about Luther and just in general as he's celebrated, and whether it's one of the things where you're always keen to celebrate his legacy as well. But we'll continue being back, talking new topics and stuff. Take care.
Let me take you home.
Take me, baby,
I wanna keep you safe and warm
just like a baby.
till the early dawn warms up to the sun. It would be so nice,
It would be so
if only for that one night. Yeah, all night.
all night.
If only for one night. Hang out with me tonight. If only for